Tonight, I want you to imagine a city that thinks it already knows its stars. Munich. Elegant shop windows glowing after dark, cobblestones still wet from a light winter rain. And behind one of those glowing windows lives a man everyone recognizes, yet almost no one truly understands. Rudolph Moshammer, fashion designer, eccentric celebrity, lover of luxury and glitter and tiny dogs with ribbons in their hair. To the cameras, he is a walking performance. To the tabloids, he is an endless headline. To his loyal customers, he is the artist who dresses them in fur and silk. But on one cold January night behind the closed door of his quiet villa, all of that vanishes. What is left in the dark is just a man and a stranger and a deal that turns into a deadly argument. Listen closely, because this is the story of how a life built on glamour ended on the floor of a silent room with no audience, no applause, and a single cable wrapped around a famous neck. It begins with a knock at the door. It is late. The city has already slipped into that strange quiet that only cold nights bring. In the streets of Munich, the last trams rattle past, nearly empty. Somewhere a taxi driver yawns at a red light. In the villa in the suburb of Grunewald, a small dog lifts its head. Daisy, the tiny Yorkshire terrier that the whole country has seen in his arms. She hears the knock before he does. Rudolph glances at the clock. It is late, but not unusual. His life has never followed normal hours. Fashion shows parties. Late calls, quiet visitors who do not use the front entrance. He walks through the softly lit hallway. The walls are lined with mirrors and framed photographs. Famous faces smile down at him from frozen moments in time. Singers, actors, politicians. Everyone wanted to be close to the designer who could make them shine. But tonight, the man on the other side of the door is not a celebrity. He is young, mid-20s, dark hair, tired eyes, a face shaped by a life that never offered anything for free. He steps inside, bringing with him the cold air of the night and something else, something heavy that seems to cling to his shoulders. Desperation. He needs money, badly. Rudolph knows that look. He has always lived surrounded by hunger, not the hunger of the rich, but the hunger of those who stand just outside the warm light, watching the party through the glass. Maybe that is why he lets the stranger in. Maybe that is why he hears the request and does not immediately say no. A simple exchange, a private deal, a few bills on the table in return for sexual favors. It is a story as old as power and money themselves. Only this time it will not end with the door closing softly behind a departing guest. They move into the living room, thick carpet under their feet, heavy curtains drawn against the night, a faint smell of expensive perfume and cigarette smoke in the air. The television is off. The room feels too quiet, as if the house itself is holding its breath. They talk. We will never know every word exchanged in that room, but we know this much. The stranger wants more money. Rudolph refuses. The agreement is not what the younger man expects. The number he has in his mind is higher, much higher. He is drowning in debts and fear in the cold reality of being far from home with no safety net. In that moment, this wealthy man in front of him with his silk dressing gown and soft carpets looks less like a client and more like an answer. 2,000 euro. That is the amount the desperate mind clings to. 2,000. Enough to breathe for a little while. But Rudolph says no. The first spark of anger flashes in the stranger's eyes. He has not come all this way for nothing. He did not step into this world of chandeliers and velvet to walk back out with empty hands. Voices rise. You can almost hear it if you close your eyes. A voice edged with entitlement, a voice tight with panic, words overlapping, sharp-cutting, accusing. The argument moves closer. Their distance shrinks. Then, in less than the time it takes to inhale, the night changes. It does not take much to turn a quarrel into a killing. A sudden movement. Hands reaching for something, anything. In the corner of the room lies a cable. It is ordinary. The kind of cable you never really notice until it is in the wrong hands at the wrong moment. The stranger's anger coils inside his chest like a spring. He feels cheated, mocked, dismissed. A rich man's refusal slams against a poor man's desperation. He grabs the cable. For a second there is still time, time to drop it, time to walk away. But that second passes. The cable slips around Rudolph's neck. At first it may have been meant as a threat, a way to scare him, to force him to pay, to show him that money and fame do not protect against everything. Then the pull tightens. Rudolph struggles. The room that once held so many parties now holds only the sound of choking of furniture, scraping of a man fighting for air. No music, no applause, just the sound of life being squeezed away. Daisy watches from across the room, small body trembling, dark eyes wide. She does not understand what is happening. She only knows that her world is breaking. Minutes later it is over. The cable is dropped. Rudolph lies still. The room is quiet again, too quiet. The stranger looks down at what he has done. This was not part of the plan. He came for money, not for murder. But the line has been crossed. There is no way back now. He turns steps past the small, terrified dog and leaves the house in silence. Outside, Munich continues to sleep, completely unaware that one of its brightest lights has just been extinguished. Morning comes. The winter sun is pale and cold. On the street outside the villa, nothing looks different. It is the chauffeur who first senses that something is wrong. He knows the rhythm of his employer's life, arrivals, departures, unexpected changes. Today the house feels wrong. The curtains are still drawn. The door is closed, but something in the air makes his skin crawl. He rings the bell. No answer. He rings again. The silence that follows is heavier than any shout. He uses his key and steps inside. The hallway is still. Pictures of celebrities look down with frozen smiles. Somewhere in the house, a small dog begins to bark, a high, frightened sound that echoes off the walls. The chauffeur follows the barking. It leads him to the living room. He pushes the door open. That is where he sees it. The body on the floor, the cable near the neck. The lifeless face of the man who yesterday was still making jokes, planning outfits, answering calls. The chauffeur's world tilts. He calls the police. Within hours, the villa in Grunwald is no longer a private haven but a crime scene. News travels fast when it belongs to someone famous. By midday, the streets outside the house are packed. Cameras, reporters, fans standing in the cold with flowers clutched in their hands. They all ask the same questions. Who would kill Rudolph Moshammer and why? The police move carefully. There are no smashed windows, no torn locks. This was not a clumsy break-in. This was personal. Someone he let through the door. On the carpet, on the furniture, on the cable itself, they find traces. Skin cells. Tiny fragments of a presence that could not stay invisible forever. The samples go to the lab. They are compared to a database. Somewhere in that long list of names, one profile lights up. A young man, an asylum seeker. Someone who had once been forced to give a sample in another case. The system connects the dots. The police follow. When they knock on his door, the story he has tried to push away surges back at once. He is taken in for questioning. Under the bright lights of the interrogation room, anger drains away. Adrenaline is gone. All that is left is exhaustion and the weight of what cannot be undone. At first he may protest, deny, twist the story. But there is the DNA, there are the marks on the body, there is the evidence he cannot talk his way around. Finally, the truth spills out piece by piece. He tells them about the villa, about the late-night visit, about the agreement for sexual favors, about the argument over money. He tells them that 2,000 euros was the price he wanted, that he felt humiliated when Rudolph refused, that he grabbed the cable in anger. He tries to balance confession with excuses. It was not planned. I did not mean to kill him. I only wanted the money. But intention does not bring back the dead. Rudolph is still gone. A city is still in shock. A dog is still wandering through an empty house looking for the arms that will never lift her again. Months pass. The cameras move from the crime scene to the courtroom. The trial begins. On one side sits the accused, no longer a faceless stranger, but a man with a history, a name, a face that the public has now learned to recognize. On the other side rest framed photographs of Rudolph in brighter days, smiling in his extravagant outfits, Daisy tucked under his arm. Witnesses speak. Experts explain the science of the evidence. Prosecutors describe how the cable was pulled, how the life left the designer's body. Defense lawyers try to paint a picture of a man pushed beyond breaking point, a life trapped in poverty, a mind clouded by fear and frustration. But in the end, the court looks at one simple fact. A man walked into a house alive and left it dead on the floor. The verdict arrives like the closing of a heavy door. Guilty. The sentence is life in prison. For one man, that means years behind walls and bars. For another, it means that every future he might have designed, every collection, every laugh, every quiet moment with his tiny dog has been erased forever. The city mourns in its own way. Some remember Rudolph as a clownish figure, loud and extravagant, a living cartoon of high society. Others remember the quieter side, the man who gave money to the homeless, the man who tried to use his wealth to build shelter for people who had nowhere to go, the man who walked the streets at night handing out blankets and hot drinks. It is strange, is it not? A man who helped those left outside the light was killed by someone standing in that darkness, reaching for the same money that once saved others. There is a bitter symmetry in that. And then there is Daisy. She becomes the symbol of everything lost. Newspapers print her photograph again and again, small face hair tied up with a ribbon eyes that now look a little emptier. Lawyers and judges argue over who will care for her. In the end, she is given a home, a roof, a warm lap to curl up in. But no one can replace the man she waited for that night, the man who never came back from the living room floor. So why does this story stay with us? Maybe because it exposes a truth people prefer to ignore. Behind money, glamour, fame, and headlines, there are always small private bargains being made in the dark between those who have and those who do not. Sometimes those bargains end with a door closing and life going on, and sometimes they end with a cable on the carpet and a city standing in the cold, staring at a house filled with flowers, wondering how a man who dressed the rich, who loved a tiny dog, who tried to help the forgotten, could die so suddenly, so violently, so pointlessly. Tonight, as you listen to this, picture that quiet villa once more. The lights are off, the mirrors are dark, the rooms are empty. Only the story remains. A famous designer, a desperate stranger, a cable on the floor, a tiny dog watching. One decision, one moment, and a life that seemed larger than the city that adored him ends in silence. Remember this the next time you see a photograph of someone smiling under bright lights or walking a red carpet or stepping out of a shining car. You know their image, you know their brand, but you never truly know what waits behind their closed door when night falls and the cameras are gone and someone knocks and the real story begins.